समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
The 91-year-old ailing father of Air India pilot Captain Sumeet Sabharwal has already, in an exclusive and only interview so far, called out how the probe panel looking into the crash met him on the pretext of condolences and then pointed a finger at his son. He has shut down in that interview with me all whispers about a possible suicide mission by his son. Now, America's top attorney, Mike Andrews, is here in India meeting with families of the victim. 130 families and counting will be suing Boeing. This even as questions continue to engulf the probe panel's findings so far. The father of Captain Sumeet Sabharwal, along with the Federation of Pilots and other pilot associations, in the Supreme Court to demand a new, fresh, independent, court-monitored investigation. In a moment from now, we'll be talking live to Mike Andrews. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, it began with this heartbreaking interview. Air India pilot Sumeet Sabharwal's father, Pushkar Raj Sabharwal, telling me through tears that when probe panel representatives of the Air India 171 crash came to meet him on the pretext of offering condolences, they quickly shifted the conversation and started blaming his son for the crash instead. The important testimony in that interview is the father sharing his son's last words, words in which the Air India pilot, just as normal, told his father that he would be calling him from the other end at Gatwick Airport. The plane, of course, crashed some seconds after it took off from Ahmedabad. That testimony is important, the testimony in our exclusive interview, for two reasons. One, it reveals how inappropriate the behavior was of the representatives of the investigation panel. But two, the testimony of the last words of the pilot to his father also capture a routine normalcy, belying all of the whispers that have been made about the mental condition of the pilot. In fact, top lawyers like American attorney Mike Andrews have called out the propensity, the lazy propensity to blame the pilot without evidence. Is that something that is shielding behemoths like Boeing? I want to welcome to this program now live our newsmaker today. Mike Andrews is with us. You've seen him on our programs before. He is in India right now. In fact, he's in Ahmedabad, where the Air India 171 plane so tragically crashed moments after takeoff. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate your time. Let me start by asking you what you've been able to gather on your few days here so far, both from talking to the families of the victims, as well as with your own assessment and own research into what may have caused the crash. Also, the probe investigation here in India, engulfed by controversy, the father of the pilot, no less, in the Supreme Court asking for a new probe. In an interview to me, he punctured many holes in the panel and the direction it's taken so far. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me again. So for the last week, we worked in the UK, both in London and Leicester, meeting with families there, updating them on our progress, answering questions that they have, and discussing what we know so far. This week and next, we'll be traveling in different cities in India, doing the very same thing. You know, the families today are just as committed, just as resolved as they were from the beginning, if not more so, to learn the true answers behind what happened. We've all heard the stories here that, of course, initially there was the talk of a bird strike, which was shut down. There was the talk of improper flap settings, and now, of course, the allegation of suicide and mass murder, which we've never believed that narrative. If only to look at the video of the plane as it is taking off, we all have seen now the rat is deployed. We've learned a lot about the rat and the conditions in which it should deploy, and we know that if it happens, something has gone wrong. Either a hydraulic failure, electric failure, or a dual engine failure. In this case, we look also at the words of the survivor, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, who tells us that just prior to the crash, the lights flickered off and on, and then turned to a greenish color. To us and to our experts, that indicates an electrical failure, and the greenish color may reflect the emergency lighting coming on. These things taken together indicate to us there is an electrical issue. And so our experts have helped us to understand the electrical architecture of the aircraft, what could go wrong, the kind of things that we can look at that could trigger a short circuit, and things that may have been known by Boeing and the FAA years before this that could have been prevented.
So, I have a lot of questions on your surmise of a possible electrical failure. But I also want to share with you an excerpt of my conversation with Captain Sumeet Sabharwal's father. Why I think this is so important is for two reasons. One is that he basically revealed that when representatives of the investigative panel came to meet him, they came to meet him on the pretext of offering condolences. But when they actually met him, they quickly started telling him that they believe that his son had in fact led this as a suicide and mass murder mission. He said that he didn't believe this for even a second, and he thought it was absolute nonsense. And the other important thing he shared was his son's final words. He said his son called him just as normal, said, "Dad, I hope you're fine, and I'm going to call you from the other end, from Gatwick." Certainly not the words of someone who was planning for this to be his final phone call. So I just want to play out this snippet for you. I think it'll be interesting for you to hear as well, and come right back with more questions. Take a look.
Thank you.
Two people came to condole
From the probe panel.
panel. They
Yes.
said that we are the investigators.
Yes.
But while talking and all that, this we are sharing and we are doing this thing and all that. But suddenly, one of them said that he had a suicidal tendency. This had hurt me like hell. I told him that he was a professional pilot and a well experienced, and he knew his job very well,
Yes.
and it is incorrect. I do not know what a man can do in that few seconds, less than 10 seconds, what he did. Because as the profile of the flight, which was shown on TV, I feel it was a balanced flight till lost.
Yeah.
But here the words, there is no thrust and I'm sinking, or something like that, I'm losing height.
Yeah, because we don't have the exact transcript.
So that was visible, and this Mayday, he has said.
Yes.
And nobody gave them, actually they should give the CVR report, cockpit voice recorder report. Then flight data recorders are there. Everything can come perfectly well.
Yeah.
Why they are hiding? The thing is, why they are hiding it?
So this is Mike, a 91-year-old father, in the twilight of his life, fighting for the truth of what happened in that crash. And one of the things he said to me was, he said, "This isn't just about my son. This is about the safety of every passenger who ever takes a flight again." And I think that's what's important to remember. That's what is at stake. It's not just about the tragedy that has taken place, but a tragedy that, God forbid, can take place again. Two important points there. Something you've been stressing on: where is the transcript of the cockpit voice recorder? What are the details of the black boxes? In India, pilot associations are demanding to know why black boxes were sent abroad if there were, when there is a sort of top-rated facility to analyze them in India. And then the Wall Street Journal reports that Indian and American investigators have been clashing over the direction of the probe. So I want you to speak both about, what the father is saying, very important account there, and also these reports of clashes between Indian and American investigators and how that might impact your plans, your case.
Thank you. So, obviously, my heart goes out to this man who has lost his son. And certainly, I think it's unfair and conjecture for anyone to guess and blame the pilot when we still have this very small piece of decontextualized information that has led some to blame the pilot, I think wrongly. Again, we aren't saying it was definitely one thing or another because the information just is not out. It's just not available yet. And so that speaks to the larger issue that you just mentioned, the issue of the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. We've learned this week that members of the AAIB and Indian investigators have traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with the NTSB to help examine and do a forensic analysis of the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. One of the things that we suspect they will be doing is to get a timeline of the cockpit voice recorder and begin to listen for not only the conversations in the cockpit, but ambient noises in the background. And we've talked about this before, but they should be able to hear some of the warnings that the pilots are experiencing in the cockpit. They should be able to hear maybe clicks or switches, if that is the case. But one of the things that we are most interested in is how sounds on the cockpit voice recorder may line up with digital information contained on the flight data recorder. Specifically, what precipitated and caused the deployment of the RAT device as the plane was beginning to rotate during its takeoff. That to us is key to understand what happened here. And so we expect that information will be forthcoming at some point. We have fully supported, obviously, the petitions that have been filed before and accepted by the Indian Supreme Court, fully support the pilot's father and his efforts, applaud his strength and perseverance in moving forward to find out the truth of what happened, because as you said, this is not just about his son, this is about the safety of the flying public, and I will add, even individuals who are not on board, because as we know, people who were on the ground at the college were also affected. And those were individuals that never expected to be involved in an aviation disaster of any sort. And so we applaud, certainly, and support his work.
Are you concerned about the reports that the Americans and the Indians are clashing, as per the Wall Street Journal, with the Wall Street Journal reporting that the American investigators seem to want to pull this in the direction of pilot error or pilot blame or faulting the pilot?
That's a narrative that we have seen over and over, time and time again. When there is a major crash, there's typically a rush to place the blame on the pilot who is deceased and can no longer speak for himself. In some cases, that comes out to be ultimately true. But again, I'll say that I think it is wrong to unfairly jump to a conclusion to blame someone for suicide and mass murder until you have the facts. And in this case, the facts just aren't known yet, at least to us and the public. And certainly I think the fact that there appears to be a clash between Indian and American or U.S. investigators may point to the fact that there is an issue that needs to be explored. And let me add this. If the pilot suicide narrative were still going to be the story that is apparently told here, why would the AAIB need to go meet with the NTSB to examine the data? To us, it tells us that there is probably something there that needs to be examined further. As I've said, the cockpit voice recorder will have ambient noises. The flight data recorder will have the digital record. And so whether there's a clash or not, the great thing about these recorders is that they will have the actual record of what's happening leading up to, during the crash, and what's happening in the cockpit. So again, we are very, very interested by what's happening this week with the meeting with the NTSB.
And I think you raise an interesting point that if indeed Indian and American investigators are clashing, then why are Indian investigators going to meet with their American counterparts in America? What How concerned are you? How concerned are you about Boeing and the pressure that it may be able to exert? There are business deals at stake. There are airlines around the world that are possibly impacted by what this probe panel discovers. We have seen the Boeing CEO admit before U.S. Congress on cutting corners before. We have seen what happened with the 737 MAX when the pilot was blamed, and it took a second crash, the Ethiopian air crash, following the Lion Air crash, to actually get to the fact that there was a software malfunction. Every pilot that I have interviewed in India believes that evidence prima facie points to some sort of electrical failure. They also point to the fact that the recovery of the two black boxes, the way that they were found, the condition in which they were found, also points to something maybe possibly having taken place with the lithium-ion batteries. This is, of course, all in the realm right now of reasonable guesswork, because we simply don't have so much critical information, like the timestamp of when the rat was deployed, like the actual cockpit voice recorder, information from the black boxes, and so on. So how concerned are you about the clout of Boeing?
Well, I think you're right to take that into consideration. Boeing is obviously a very large company with interests worldwide, certainly a major manufacturer and supplier in the U.S. and around the world. And they do exert a tremendous amount of influence in many, many ways. But, for us, again, when we have a situation like this in which data is available, there is a black box that was recovered, there is a cockpit voice recorder that is recovered, we tend to treat these comments that are made by Boeing and others as sort of background static. Boeing is going to do their part to defend their product. We certainly expect that, and we hear that regularly. But that's why we try to stay focused on the actual data. And until we have that, there's just no way to know what may have happened. But you're right. Boeing will exert considerable influence in this. Again, that's why we are encouraged that the investigation now is focusing on a forensic analysis of the data and the cockpit voice recorder.
What is the feedback you are getting from families of the victims? You are in Ahmedabad as we speak. It is the city where the crash took place. I know many of the families are, of course, in England, which you just mentioned you have been to, and now here you are in India. What is the one overwhelming feedback that you're getting from the relatives of the victims? You are representing 130 families, and those numbers could increase. What are they saying to you, Mike?
From the beginning has told us that they want to know the truth. They want transparency. They want to know what happened, why it happened, and how it could have been prevented. They are still today, 6 months later, asking those very same questions. They are equally, if not more, resolved today as we get further away from the crash. Because as you know, there are stages of grief. And at this point, the families are attempting to adjust to their new normal. They are attempting to understand how they can go forward, in many cases, without the primary breadwinner in their home. Some families have, in the UK, for example, had to move from certain areas to areas that are more economical or less expensive to live in, just so they can make ends meet. And in some cases, children, college-age children, have had to drop out of school and go to work to help support the family. And so the families are suffering in every way imaginable, while they still try to look forward to and expect the truth. And they are certainly looking to us and others to help them navigate what's happening now and to help them understand as information does become available.
Well, some of these stories are really heartbreaking. The images on our screen right now are that of a family that was getting onto a plane for the very first time in their life. They were from a farmer's family in Gujarat, where you are today. And in fact, they were so delighted to be traveling by air that they organized what's called a puja, a prayer, of the passports that they were holding for the first time. Little did they know that their very first flight would never, in fact, lead them to their destination, but would lead them to death instead. So really heartbreaking tales there. Mike, let me ask you in the end, what is the strategy? What are you thinking? You're suing Boeing. These families, some of them come from very modest backgrounds. They will be counting on compensation, but they might be worried about getting into a lawsuit. They might be worried about pressure from behemoths like Boeing. So how are you handling those concerns?
So again, rather than focusing right now on the specifics of a potential lawsuit, we are still very much focused on finding out what happened. That is where we have to start, both for the families and their progress and path forward, but also for any litigation, because if Boeing is found to be at fault, or if component part manufacturers are at fault, we need to know who they were and what role they may have played. And so, again, rather than jump out and make specific allegations in a potential lawsuit, we're still right with the family, very much focused on understanding what happened, how and why. But you're correct. These families are in many cases concerned about the implications of trying to seek justice, because they're looking at a company, as you rightly said, the size of Boeing. And so we're trying to be with them, to help them understand the process, and to help them understand the information as it comes out.
Does accepting compensation in any way legally stop them from pursuing this case as it moves forward?
That is an excellent question. We know that there was the interim payment of 25 lakhs, and we think most families now have received that initial payment. There was also then the 1 crore offer from Tata, which we understand families are working through that claims process. Some have received those payments. I think many are still working through the paperwork. We have learned recently that there is a release that, and we've heard this from our clients, that in some cases someone is presenting a release to some of the victims' families to sign that would sign away their rights in these cases. And that would include Boeing and anyone else potentially that could be included in the case. We are concerned about that because certainly as this investigation is very active, is ongoing. In fact, we have representatives in Washington today still trying to decode the data. Certainly we think it's improper at this point and wrong to ask anyone to sign a release that would potentially give up rights that they may not even understand that they have. So you're exactly right. We're concerned about that.
And if that is the case, if they do have to sign such a release, how does that implicate or how does that impact the case ahead?
Well, in some cases, if they sign a release and they've agreed to give up their rights, it's going to create serious issues for them later. They may actually be surrendering their right if they sign a release at this point. There's just no reason right now for anyone to sign a release that would compromise their rights in any way. We still don't know what caused this crash. The investigators don't know what caused this crash. And so we are still encouraging all of our clients, and certainly anyone who has an interest in this, to remain focused on the search for the truth and remain focused on the search for what happened here.
Yeah. Finally, you said that you are going by the only eyewitness who has survived this crash, his testimony, and you're looking very closely at this account of flickering lights, lights that turned green, as it were, before the plane went down. There are others who are talking about a possible electrical failure. There are others who are looking at, whether airworthiness directives from Boeing on this very fleet is something that the pilots, for example, were even aware of. Did the regulator in India do what was needed? Did these directives get the attention they deserved? We've looked at everything from water leaks to other problems on the 787 in particular, which is a highly computerized aircraft. We have the Osaka landing of this particular plane that highlights that uncommanded uncommanded action can take place. In other words, the pilot doesn't command it, but the plane almost acts on its own. So I want to give you the last word as you try and understand what may have caused this crash. What are the specific leads you're looking at right now?
So we know that, as you said, the survivor mentions this flickering of lights and then a greenish hue. That is an indicator to us of an electrical or a potential electrical problem. The deployment of the RAT device, certainly at the time in which it was rotating from the runway and beginning to take off in the air, that specific timing again is concerning to us because it could potentially point to an electrical problem. So we know that there are these clues or these symptoms of something happening. Essentially, the aircraft is telling us something is happening here, something is wrong, and there should be more data on the flight data recorder. So we set that aside for a second, and then we say, okay, what is our understanding of the electrical architecture of this plane? And as you correctly stated, it is a highly computerized, very electrically operated aircraft. When it was marketed and sold, it was supposed to be the most complex electrically operated civilian aircraft to date. And so that presents certain challenges in managing the electrical system. Our understanding is there is a primary, or what Boeing has referred to as a common core electrical system, and a backup or an emergency system. And the backup system typically will only add power to those devices that are essential for flight. It begins to shed or to disconnect things that are not completely essential for flight. And so the lighting can be one of those things. The deployment of the RAT certainly could indicate that it is needing additional backup power. And so we have symptoms. We know of things that can affect the electrical system. You mentioned water leaks and the FAA directive. FAA authority is within the United States. We don't know yet what extent emphasis may have been placed on that directive outside of the country, specifically in India. We do not know what emphasis may or may not have been placed on the necessity to check for these water leaks, to check for the couplings that need to be replaced, because the documents are very clear from the FAA that water leaks can occur, are occurring, and can create electrical shorts. We do not know yet if that is what is involved here, but what we do know is that we have symptoms that indicate a potential electrical issue, and we have a number of things that can affect the electrical system on this plane. That's why we are holding out and waiting for the data to help connect those two dots between the symptoms and the potential causes.
And before we let you go, how will you, on behalf of the families, get access to that data? One of the most controversial things about the interim report released by the investigation panel here has been a summary reference to a conversation purportedly between the two pilots on the fuel control switches. And everybody from the family to the Federation of Pilots has pushed back saying, give us the verbatim transcript. Let us hear the cockpit voice recorder. You cannot do this third person sort of summary when you're talking about the last words of Captain Sumeet Sabharwal and his co-pilot. When you look at the direction in which the probe is going in India, all of the accompanying lawsuits as well, the judges here in open court actually said that they were very disturbed by reporting in a section of the Western media. They didn't believe anyone in the country at the moment has any reason to believe that the pilot was responsible for this. When you talk about how the answers lie in that data, are you going to maybe look at filing an interim sort of petition for access to the data? Because God knows when a final report comes. God knows when the public has access to this data. And by then, a narrative may have set in and, the probe may reach a conclusion that people don't agree with or agree with.
Yeah, and you're right. That's a major issue in this and in any other crash, is how do we get to the actual data? We've tried to approach it in a number of ways. One, we filed a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request in the United States to the FAA for any information that they may have related to the initial investigation. Again, the investigation that sort of led up to this preliminary report, which created many more questions than it provided answers. We filed that months ago, and then, of course, our government in the United States experienced a shutdown in which all the agencies essentially were paused and shut down. That has resumed, business has resumed, and so we have renewed our Freedom of Information Act request. We are currently waiting for data or some response from the FAA. Whether they have data, what they don't have, we just don't know yet, but we're trying to approach it from that direction. In addition, we feel that the pilot's petition before the Supreme Court is very encouraging, and you mentioned statements that were made in open court. We are very encouraged by those comments because we agree. They echo our sentiments. It's wrong at this point for anyone to, without basis, blame the pilot for intentional mass murder and suicide. We need that data. And so certainly I think there's a growing recognition in India that from the court's perspective, it is important to examine what may have happened with this airplane before we jump to conclusions and blame a man who's not here to defend himself.
Absolutely, Mike. And I know that 130 families, but I think all of India would be looking towards you as well as the petitions in the Supreme Court that are already underway to get to the bottom of this. The probe panel has unfortunately, with its interim report, left us with more questions than answers, and the report has been roundly criticized by so many people who are in the aviation industry. We thank you for your time, and we wish you luck as you try and get to the bottom of what caused Air India 171 to crash. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.